Hi there, happy Friday. Today I'm going to be talking with you about how to upgrade your pre-1940s built home to make it more comfortable. So I'm Jane, I am the architect, the principal director and a chartered architect, eco-refurbisher, conservation, RIBA Conservation Register registrant, and I specialise in helping homeowners who own homes that were built before 1940 turn those into homes that you really can enjoy with your friends and family, homes that suit a modern lifestyle, are comfortable to be in, and that is going to be the focus of today's live, is comfort, and that will help you protect the planet as well. So there are three main reasons why your home is not comfortable. And when I say not comfortable, I'm really talking about thermal comfort, really, and some of the health effects that are associated with some of the reasons why you might have poor thermal comfort. But thermal comfort is basically about you feeling warm enough. That is the main thing, really. So the three main reasons are damp, heat loss, and drafts. So damp and heat loss and drafts, those are all sometimes they're a bit they're in combination with each other. You might not necessarily just have one of those things, but each of those, once you've kind of tackled each of those individually, then you should be feeling a lot more comfortable in your home. And I'm going to go into more detail into each of those. So if you have a pre-1940s built home and you're feeling a bit cold now, we're properly in winter, we've got snow on the ground and it is actually quite cold outside. And if you're feeling that inside as well, then put #cold in the comments below and let us know how you're experiencing the cold this winter in your home. So the first of those potential reasons was damp, and there are lots of reasons that you might have damp in your home, but really the main thing is you've got water coming in somewhere. Now it might be coming in from outside, or it might be that you've got a leak of something is leaking inside. So that is really the thing with damp, is figuring out where the water is coming from. And water moves, and it can move quite a long way, and it's quite difficult to track sometimes because water moves in mysterious ways, so you don't necessarily know exactly where it's coming from. You can use a thermographic thermal imaging camera to help you to track where water's coming from. That can be a really useful way of doing it. Just feeling walls and looking for sort of glistening sort of specks of damp on the walls can sort of help to figure out where is wet, and then kind of looking at, it's just a process of elimination, really, trying to follow back where that water can be coming from. But most commonly you'll find that it's coming from gutters and the roof. So a lot of the time, really good maintenance and clearing your gutters regularly, particularly after autumn, is one of the best ways of preventing leaks happening. Also things like lagging your pipe work, so adding those little insulating foam things onto the pipe to help prevent bursts if it's particularly cold. Those two things, bits of maintenance and bits of protection for pipe work, can really help preventing leaks. And really ideally you want to be preventing things, because once it happens then it's a lot more costly to repair later. So it's much better to get measures in place before something happens to make sure that it's not going to cost you more down the line. So damp coming in usually from above. Chimneys are often quite a vulnerable place. Gutters, anywhere where there's an unusual junction, like valleys, and flat roofs can often be quite vulnerable to leaking, especially older ones. Rising damp is something that lots of people talk about. There is a theory amongst a lot of people that rising damp is a myth. I'm not an expert in rising damp. I tend to go along with the idea that possibly it's not as big a thing. The rising damp thing is not such a big thing as certainly as these sort of chemical injection companies might have you believe. And certainly there are lots of homes that have had mortgage companies insist on chemical injections on houses that have already had chemical injections. So I would certainly say if you are struggling to figure out where your damp is coming from and you can't do it yourself, then definitely call in an expert, but don't call in a chemical injection damp-proof course company, because call in somebody who's independent, somebody who actually they get their money from carrying out inspections and letting you know maybe various options that you've got for solving the problem, but mainly diagnosing what the problem is and where it's coming from. Those are the kind of people that you want to get in to check out your damp, not the sort of people who are going to then try and sell you, maybe come and have a look for free, and then they're going to be trying to sell you an expensive and possibly unnecessary treatment measure. So that's one thing with damp. Be careful about who you get to help you solve the problem. But once you have eliminated where the water is coming from, then you want to be looking at ventilating, you want to be looking at heating to dry out the fabric. When I talk about fabric, building fabric, I mean all the stuff that your house is made up of, whether that's walls, floors, maybe that's concrete, bricks, whatever it is, whatever stuff your house is made up of, that is the building fabric. So you want to, once you've stopped the water getting into it, you want to then let it dry out. You don't necessarily want to speed it up too much because that could also cause damage, but you want to let it dry out as quickly as you can without it being damaging. This is a very loose way of saying that, but a bit of warmth and better ventilation and dry out that fabric. And then other ways of sort of detecting problems with damp are smelling. You know, some people have got a really good sense of smell, some people don't, but certainly if you can smell damp and smell a kind of musty, mouldy kind of smell, that is a sign that there's a problem, you need to sort it out. If you actually can see mold growth, that is another problem that you really need to tackle that, because mold growth, and there are particularly some bad forms of mold growth, can be really harmful to your health, and they're especially harmful for younger and older people, and for people who have got perhaps problems with respiratory conditions like asthma. It can be really harmful for people with those conditions. So you definitely, if you spot mold growth, you definitely want to be tackling that. But all of the dampness will have the effect of making your home feel less comfortable from a warmth perspective as well. It might add to the humidity in the air, and that can be uncomfortable as well. So that actually, yes, water coming in, but condensation occurring just because of cooking and washing things inside and drying clothes inside. That is actually bigger than possibly many other forms of causing damp, is from condensation. So that is where you really need to ventilate. And so if you're drying clothes inside, you need to make sure that there's ventilation so that the moisture-laden air that's coming from those clothes can actually escape and go out, so that your air is not too full of damp. Because if you've got very humid air, and that can happen because you use your shower and you don't have an extract fan on, you know, all that moisture and humidity that comes out of it comes into the air when you're showering, that then can settle onto your building fabric and cause these sort of mold problems and damp problems. So ventilation is a massively important part of reducing and preventing damp problems that are caused by condensation, as is heating. But one of the other key things to that is leading us into the next thing that we're going to talk about, and that is having cold surfaces, because if you've got a relatively cold surface, that is where this damp air is going to settle as condensation, and that's where you're going to notice problems. So if you have a problem with damp in your home, put #damp in the comments, maybe describe what problems you're experiencing with that, anything that you've done to try and solve it, let us know. We'd be interested to find out. So the second thing that you need to tackle then is heat loss. And what I mean by heat loss, I'm really talking about heat loss through the fabric of the building. So as I said before, the fabric of the building is everything that is made up of, that the building's made up of. So that could be the walls, the floors, everything, the bricks, concrete, whatever it is your building's made up of. So there are some calculations that you can do that can measure how quickly heat will pass through, say, your wall or your roof or your floor, and the aim would be to minimize the speed that the heat travels through and out of your home, and that is where you'll get the, what usually we refer to, well, there's lots of different ways of calculating it, but one of the most common ones is to talk about a U value. So a U value typically for example, passive house is 0.15. That's a typical commonly used U value for passive house throughout for most building elements. When you're looking at building regulations, for example, a warm roof is 0.18, so it's only slightly, so 0.18 is a little bit less efficient than 0.15. So hopefully that helps you understand, like a better U value is going to be lower, so I think it's 0.22 for a ground floor construction. So that is much worse than a 0.15 blanket sort of target U value that you would go for when you're looking at passive house. So the only real way to improve your heat performance, your heat loss performance of your walls and your roof and so on, is to add insulation. There isn't really an alternative way of doing that. It's about using materials that are more resistant to heat passing through them. That's all you can do. Now, if you've got an old building, then that can be quite difficult to do. You can add extra insulation to the outsides or the insides of solid brick walls, but solid brick walls are commonly considered to be quite hard to treat. But there are always possible ways of doing it. It's because it's a bit more difficult, it also tends to be a bit more expensive. So it's worth doing, it's worth looking at, but it's worth tackling the easiest things first and doing gradual improvements. Unless, of course, you're looking at doing a really massive, full-on refurbishment and upgrading everything at once, because perhaps you don't want to live there until it's all been upgraded, and that, you know, you can do that. You can do a massive refurbishment and upgrade, but it's quite invasive, disruptive. If you're actually living in the property at the same time, then you maybe want to do it in a more of a staged way and consider your options, both from the point of view of how effective and how easy it is to do, but also how disruptive that's going to be for you and your life, and make a balance and decision based on the the various factors that go into it. So if you are suffering from a cold house, and that's because the house just isn't keeping the heat in because there's just not enough insulation, and your walls are cold, and you can see the roof has melted off your roof. The snow that fell the other day has melted off your roof first, then that is a sign that your insulation is not really good enough, and there are best to look at ways to up the level of insulation that you've got and improve the heat loss. So hashtag heat loss in the comments below and let us know what you're experiencing with your home, if you need to upgrade the fabric of your building and make it warmer. And then the third thing to take into consideration is drafts. And drafts are really quite a big deal. Even very tiny cracks in plaster can cause a draft that can have an effect. And the whole thing, the air movement, wind chill factor outside is everybody knows about that there'll be the weather report, and then it's such and such a degree, and it's it's warm, but if you've got higher winds, you will feel colder as a result of that. And it's exactly the same inside your house. If you've got air movement, you will feel that, and it will make you feel less comfortable. If you've got much reduced air movement, then you can have your heating set at a much lower rate and still feel really comfortable because you haven't got that wind chill factor. So drafts are really key, and actually one of the easiest things to tackle. Certainly for women, feel drafts a lot more sensitive to drafts than men, and in terms of thermal comfort, there's a range where human beings feel comfortable within, and it kind of depends on what activities you're doing, and it also depends on what clothes you're wearing as well. But what you tend to find is that within that range, men will tend to feel more comfortable towards the cooler end of that comfort spectrum, whereas women will tend to feel more comfortable towards the higher temperature rate of that range. So women do tend to be more sensitive to cold and more sensitive to drafts. So yeah, that's why maybe if you're a woman, you might want to do more about this, than you might have a lot of persuasion on your hands to make this happen. But tackling drafts is going to really help you, because you're not going to feel as much discomfort from air moving. So really, there are lots of simple things that you can do here, but it's about filling cracks and gaps. If you've got cracks in plaster work, fill that with a filler, redecorate and fill all cracks, and that will really help. In floorboards, if you've got bare floorboards, then seal between the joints between the floorboards so that the air's not filtering up through them. Between the skirting boards and the floorboards, again, you can use a sealant along that edge and to minimise and reduce the amount of air that can move through there. Where you've got doors and windows, there are all sorts of kind of brush strips and seals and these sort of foam squidgy kind of sealant strips that they're really easy to apply. You can do it yourself very simply, and just that they can help reduce the amount of airflow. This is where when you're looking at older buildings, particularly things like sliding sash windows, you want to be looking at more like brush strips and different things. They are a little bit more tricky to do, but even an old, not very well fitted sliding sash window can be massively improved by some good draft proofing measures. Another place to look at is where pipes are going through walls. Perhaps your soil pipe from the toilet, perhaps the pipe from the kitchen sinks going out through the wall. All of those places, quite often you'll find lots of little cracks around those pipes. So things like expanding foam insulation, it's not very nice stuff. I prefer not to use it, but there are certain times and places when I think it is worth using and it is acceptable to use it. Things like mastic sealants and air tightness strips. These are all really easy to get hold of. Some are more expensive than others, but they're really quite easy to get and easy to work with as well. So it's very easy to do a lot of draft proofing for yourself on your home, and it can be really effective. In fact, it can be one of the easiest things to do. And I did a very old blog post once about very cheap ways that you can actually improve your home. And even if you've just got a roll of sellotape and you stick bits of sellotape over old keyholes and things, maybe keyholes that you don't use that much, stick bits of sellotape over it, prevent the draft passing through it, and it will have a marked effect to block out all of those. There's a kind of a mantra that's being used in the building industry at the moment, which is build tight, ventilate right. So I've certainly had some clients worried about cutting out this ventilation because but we need ventilation, you need fresh air to breathe, and we don't want to get rid of the ventilation really because that cause problems. So yes, you do need fresh air. Yes, you do need ventilation, but you don't often need as much ventilation as some of the older buildings will give you, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable without it. Plus, what you want to do is ventilate in the right places. You want to make sure that you've got ventilation in your kitchen, you've got ventilation in your bathroom, and you want to make sure that there's a good amount of air changes to deal with all that humidity that can occur from your showering, from bathing, from washing clothes, from washing dishes, from cooking rice and pasta and boiling potatoes, whatever it is. All that activity generates a lot of moisture, and you want to be ventilating those spaces where there is a lot of moisture to get that out of the air. But you don't want a lot of uncontrolled ventilation filtering in everywhere, which is going to actually make it really uncomfortable for you to live there. So control ventilation, minimize the amount of drafts, and make sure you've got the right amount of ventilation in the places where you need to ventilate, like the kitchen and the bathroom, utility room. So if you have problems with drafts and you can feel a chill, perhaps you're sitting in front of a fire but you can feel it's still cold on your back, that's kind of can be a sign of either the wall behind you or the wind behind you is cold and it needs to be upgraded from an insulation point of view, or that you've got a bit of a draft problem and you need to do some sealing up and draft proofing. So those are really the three really key areas: damp, heat loss, and drafts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in quite a large Victorian villa, and it was really very, very cold when I was growing up. We used to wake up in the morning and the condensation on the inside of the windows had frozen, and yes, that's so pretty, all the sort of crystallized condensation frozen on the inside of the windows, but it's really cold and you certainly don't want to get out of bed when it's that cold. So I've now helped my parents still live in that house. I've helped them with a lot of work to improve the warmth of their home, and we no longer get the frozen condensation so much. I don't think we get it at all, actually. I don't live there anymore, so I can't really exactly say if it's there all the time or just occasionally, but certainly it used to be a very regular thing, and now the whole house feels a lot more comfortable. And once we cut out a lot of the drafts, it was so clear, you could hear and feel how much quieter and stiller the house felt, because it just didn't have all that rushing air going through it, and it certainly made it a whole lot more comfortable. So it can be done even with a tricky Victorian house that's got loads of leaky bits and lots of sash windows, and you want to keep all of those beautiful original features. You can still make it much more comfortable, much warmer, by carrying out a few simple measures. And if you've got any questions about any of this, I am going to start covering a bit more about eco-design and eco-refurbishment in these lives. If it's helpful for you, you're interested, let me know in the comments below, #replay if you're watching the replay. And yeah, leave any comments you've got and I'll get notified about it, and I'll come back in and either use your question as the basis of a future live, or answer you in responses in the comments. Okay, thanks for now. I'll look forward to seeing you next Friday.